My First Quilt Show is brought to you by Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Aurifil, perfectly suited for every quilt project. Hovels, cut it close with Hovels. Omnigrid, providing quilters with specialty rulers and accessories for over 30 years. Riley Blake, colorful, playful, and sophisticated fabrics that can't help but bring a smile to your face.
Hello, I'm Sara Gallegos and this is My First Quilt Show. And today I'm going to show you how to make a very traditional block, a log cabin. And it's a fun block to make because you can do a lot of different things with it. You can go traditional with your fabrics, or you could go modern or bold and get a lot of different looks with it. So I'm going to show you how we create this block and how I like to make it a little bit faster. Now I've started with 2.5-inch strips, and it's not really a jelly roll friendly project because as you get to the larger borders of the block, you need a lot more than 2 strips. So you do want to cut yourself 2.5-inch strips. And I've started with one center piece. I've used this kind of bright peachy orangey color. Traditionally in a log cabin, that center block is the fire burning within the home. So it's oftentimes some sort of a red variation. And from there, I've got 3 lights and 3 darks. So 2 different sets of strips that kind of give you the dimension of the log cabin. You really want to have some contrast between the 2 sides of the block. So if you've got 6 different fabrics, pick 3 that run a little bit lighter and 3 that run a little bit darker so that you can really see how the block plays out. So with my first 2.5-inch strip of my peachy color, I'm going to subcut that into 2.5-inch squares. And what I like to do is just to line up my ruler on the straight edge of my strip and cut a nice fresh edge. So I've got a clean cut there, and that's my scrap. And then we'll flip it around, and now I can line up the 2.5-inch marking on my small ruler right like this on the clean edge that I just cut on my strip, and cut. Take it away, and I've got a perfect 2.5-inch square there. And you're going to just keep on cutting 2.5-inch squares until you get as many as you need to create the full quilt. I did 16 blocks, so I had 16 of these orange squares. So as many as you want to create, you're going to cut all of those first, and it'll save you a little bit of time as you go. It's nice to use a ruler that's got really clear 1/2-inch markings as well, so that you can easily see. If you don't have great markings, you can use the glow line tape to give yourself a nice place to cut. And I love my Hovels rotary cutter. It's so easy to use and comfortable. Just make sure you're closing that blade again. It's a little bit of safety precaution there. So we've got a whole bunch of our 2.5-inch squares cut. And now it's time to start sewing. My first color or fabric that I'm going to add as I build out my log cabin rows is this right here. And instead of subcutting this strip into 2.5-inch pieces, I'm going to show you how we can kind of speed piece our log cabin. So we'll take our squares and our strip, and I'm using a 1/4-inch foot, and you just want to place your squares even on the long edge of your fabric and stitch. So when I get to the end of my first square, I'll place my second one on. I don't even have to cut my threads or my fabrics. I'm just going to continue building these strips out. Okay, and just keep going. And we'll go ahead and stop at 3. And now we're going to take this to the iron. And it is really important with this block to make sure that you are pressing your fabrics toward the darker side. With that ruler. So just give it a nice press. And then you can flip open your dark block. Give it a press. And I like to press before I cut so that I make sure that I'm subcutting my units nice and straight. Okay, so we've got our 3 there. And now you can subcut what you've just created. So we'll go nice and even. I'm making sure that I line up my ruler with the straight edges of my red block. Give it a cut. And I like to do all of the right sides first. I'll just get rid of the excess there. Then we'll flip our pieces around and do the opposite edge. There we go. And you would just continue cutting until you've cut apart all of your pieces. Whoops, didn't quite get that one. There we go. So there you have it. So that is the first half of your log cabin block. From there, we are going to add the third piece. So on a log cabin, you kind of work out in a spiral. So I've made sure that I've aligned all of my red pieces on the left side so that my lighter fabric is on the right. And then on the top edge, you're going to add another piece of the same fabric that we just sewed. So you start creating the spiral that we're working on. And you can use the same speed piecing method where you take your long strip. I like to place it under the foot just to get it nice and sturdy. Okay, and now we'll take our segments that we just cut. We want to make sure that we sew with that corally color facing down, and that's what's going to make sure that the next strip is in the right direction when we press it. So we'll stitch. I just love the speed piecing method. Instead of cutting all these little rectangles, it's just so much faster to speed piece this way. And by cutting them individually after each segment, you're even squaring up your pieces as you continue to build. And that's always going to give you a better result on your finished project. Okay, so there are 3. And once again, I would just press those segments, open them up, and trim them. So I'm going to show you now how we would continue building with our segments. So here's what it looks like after you have attached that second piece and you've got your white up on top and your coral color to the left. Then you're going to take your first of your darker fabrics and sew that to the left side of the segment that you just created. So again, we're kind of working in a spiral. Next, you would sew to the bottom of that, so you can see we're spiraling around, and it's the same fabric as this segment, so you sew each fabric 2 times. So here we've got the first of our light colors, and now the first of our dark colors. And then we'll take the second of our light colors and add that. So here's what that looks like. Adding it up top. And then we will add it to the side as well. Okay, so we're still working in that spiral direction. And then we need the second of our dark colors, which would be this one. Okay, so along the bottom. And then you would add it to the top. And then you just keep building out. So again, you're just continuously working in that spiral direction until you've added all 3 of your lights and all 3 of your dark colors. Once you have completed all of your blocks, you'll square them up so they're all exactly the same size, and that's when you get to play with layouts. So if you've got a design wall, or if you're working on your bed, which is what I did with mine, you can kind of play with the orientation of the colors. And if you were to Google search log cabin block, you will see that there are so many different placements you could do. I did mine all with the colors, the dark color in the same spot. You could center all of the dark colors and then you have lights on the outside or vice versa. So you've got a lot of different things that you can do with a very simple log cabin block. So I hope you've enjoyed learning about the log cabin. Go home and play with it yourself, and I'll see you on our next episode of My First Quilt Show.
My First Quilt Show is brought to you by Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Aurifil, perfectly suited for every quilt project. Hovels, cut it close with Hovels. OmniGrid, providing quilters with specialty rulers and accessories for over 30 years. Riley Blake, colorful, playful, and sophisticated fabrics that can't help but bring a smile to your face.